Character design is hard. Many people struggle with it, and with good reason. From colors to shapes to even accessories, everything must be cohesive and built in a way that appeals to the audience. When it comes to VTuber designs, there's some specific elements you may not even realize must be taken into account over regular character design. It's its own beast. We are going to cover many of these unique aspects you may not realize to take into account when creating your VTuber design or other people's VTuber designs, along with some general character design basics. Before we start, I would like to mention that I highly recommend Squiiji and Yam Albat's videos on VTuber designs and concepts. This video will act as a sort of extension on topics I feel were relevant but were not discussed, or I will simply be referencing tips mentioned in those videos to help you improve your VTuber designs. Links to those videos will be in the description. General character design. Here's a list of some basic character design elements that we must take into account when making any character. Starting off with color scheme. Do you have primarily warm tones or cool tones? Do you have an analogous color scheme, monochrome, complementary, or triadic? That may be a lot of words, but in essence, this is asking, do you have heavy contrasting colors on the color wheel, such as purple and yellow, or green and red? Or do we have similar colors on the color wheel, such as yellow and orange? Or do we have a mixture of both, such as blues and oranges, but also purple, so they're similar on the color wheel, but also an opposite? Next up is silhouette. When blacked out against a white background, is your character easily recognizable? Does it stand out against the crowd? Or is it very generic? Maybe it has an unclear silhouette. Maybe it looks like your hair merges with your shoulders. Or maybe you just look like every other Fox VTuber and it's hard to pick yours out. You can break up the silhouette by using interesting pieces such as hair flyaways or different sorts of clothing pieces, different shapes, anything to make it break out of the mold. Then there's shape language. There's 3 categories: triangles, rectangles, and circles. Typically, a lot of other shapes fit into one of these 3 categories. Triangles in character design and also environmental design represents aggression and danger. Think tall, triangular mountains or sharp shark teeth. Rectangles represent stoicism and rigidity. It represents stability, such as a large building or rocks. Circles are soft and represent unity and even something cosmic, something space related. You might find a lot of circular shapes and a lot of sci-fi themes. Now this one's one I don't hear enough about, and that is choices relating to anatomy, specifically proportions. Are you going for stylized proportions or more realistic proportions? For instance, if you have an adult character, do you choose to make it 3 heads tall or 8 heads tall? Maybe 7 heads tall, more realistic. Maybe 6 heads tall. Are you going to have a big head and a small body? Or maybe a small head and a big body? Maybe big hands, big feet. There's lots of choices to be made, and this will reflect on your character design. This can reflect on what kind of character you want to make. For instance, if you make a 3 heads tall character with a big head and a small body, that will seem more cutesy to the audience, while an 8 heads tall character with a big chest and big arms will seem a lot more intimidating. Finally, there's art style. Usually with VTubers, we tend to go with a more anime style. However, we are not limited to just anime style. There's pop art style, cartoon style, realistic. There's painterly style, and many more. With anime styles, there's still a choice to be made. There's no generic anime style. For instance, you could go with a Dragon Ball style, or even Clannad. 2 completely different styles. Making your character design. Step 1. to any design, any character design. This is VTubers or any like OC, any sort of character you want to come up with. Start with a character profile. More importantly, start with these few basic questions. Number 1, what is your character's personality? Are they a little hot-headed? Or are they calm and cool? Are they bubbly and silly or strict and serious? Are they shy? Are they outgoing? For instance, a hot-headed character may follow a more triangular-shaped language to say they are more aggressive. They might have warm colors for their scheme as a testament to their hot-blooded nature and fiery spirit. Any sort of personality you give your character will reflect in the choices of colors you choose and the shape language, along with all the other choices, so it's important to come up with this first. Number 2. What is my character's environment? What is their theme? For instance, a character in a cold climate or with a snowy theme might have a fuzzy warm coat, fur-lined boots, cold sport-themed items, so on and so forth. You could take this further in by asking about things like what is their career or what is their pastime. This can also change things even more so. So for instance, if they're in a cold climate and they're a skier, you can make them even more ski themed with like goggles, a ski mask, a visor, more sporty clothing versus someone in a cold climate who's just a regular passerby. They might just wear casual knit jackets and earmuffs. Now getting further into design, here's where the VTubing aspect comes into play. Here's some unique characteristics of design that only apply to VTubers. First off, most VTubers stream from waist or bust up. This is where you want to concentrate the majority of detail in your design. Focus on the eyes, mouth, and hair the most, since this is where your attention will be naturally drawn when watching. This is where the most movement happens, for instance. This is where all the details should be going. No point in putting all the detail on the feet when the viewer is not going to be seeing that most of the time when you're streaming. Now this is for anyone who plans on rigging their own model, especially if you aren't experienced in rigging. Avoid too many patterns on the face. Avoid too much shading on the face. There's a lot of movement going on. With deformers, this can get a little bit complicated, especially if you're not used to it. And especially if you're drawing your own model and you don't know how to properly cut your layers to put the shading separate, for instance. This can cause problems if you accidentally merge your layers. So if this is only if you're the one doing this for the first time. I don't recommend having too many patterns on the face. I recommend adding that later, or if you have a good artist who knows exactly how to cut live 2D models themselves, then maybe you could do it. But it will be a bit complicated if you're rigging for the first time. That is only my recommendation for beginners. So this is something that's been going around Twitter recently. Since live 2D is a form of puppetry, it allows for much more detailed designs with plenty of accessories. So yes, with a VTuber, you could have much more complicated models compared to, let's say, anime or any sort of animated cartoon, anything hand-drawn since they have to draw every detail frame by frame. But should you have a more complicated model? Please note that every accessory and detail is extra money and time to draw and to rig, and doesn't necessarily translate into better character design. Recently, VTuber riggers have been talking about how recent models have too much detail to rig and are extremely time-consuming compared to previous models. When designing any character, I recommend starting with a full-body base drawing. This is to flesh out your initial design, your ideas, and then trying to simplify it as a chibi version. Then as a stick figure version. As you go smaller and smaller, you might find some details don't add to the design and making it recognizable, and it becomes too hard to simplify into something recognizable on a chibi scale or a stick figure scale. Those details that you find you'll have to get rid of are extras and should probably be considered removed. Remember, if you find your character too tedious to draw, who will want to make fan art? This is another thing I saw recently with Mari Yume's video on re-debuts. type of content, and you. Going off what I learned in Mari Yume's video on redebuting, typically you'll find a better mesh with your character if the type of content you make and the community you want to foster reflects your design. For instance, most people see a cutesy model and assume they are more wholesome, are younger, and more innocent. They'll expect cutesy content rather than lewd content. On the other hand, with a more sexy, mature-looking model, you might find people assume you make more lewd adult content rather than wholesome content. Matching your type of model to the community you want to foster and the content you want to make is recommended, at least to help foster a better sense of comfort and less disconnect between you and your character. The model not matching you and the community you want to foster is one of the biggest reasons why people redebut. It happens, but knowing exactly what type of content you want to make will help you spend less time, money, and energy on a character design you don't mesh with. Alternatively, you can create a design that intentionally conflicts with other people's initial perceptions of you for interesting contrast. For instance, having a cute, calm chibi model, but being super chaotic, like Chibidoki, or a super buff, intimidating model, but being soft and having a soft voice, like the character Alphonse Elric, or even having a calm, feminine model as a chaotic giga-chad cis man like Porcelain Maid can make very interesting content. Now this is the most important rule of all. Find a design you love. If something feels off, or you find yourself wishing for certain changes, make those changes. Keep designing. Your first design should never be the final design. Iterate over and over until everything is clear and loved by you. It's important to come to love your design enough to want to use it for VTubing, if as a career, for years to come, because art and rigging alone can be expensive. And unfortunately, so can redebuting be with losing an audience if still small. Controversial, I know, but it does happen, and sometimes you have to build your audience again from ground up after redebuting, especially if your content changes along with your model. Because I know this video is pretty long and I have to edit, I will continue in another video, so make sure to like and subscribe for part 2, where I'll be going over my personal process when designing characters from beginning to end, along with the goods and bads with my own design. Since I'm not perfect either, there's several flaws in my own design and some good aspects, so we'll be going over that too. Thank you for watching, bye bye!